My 33F husband, 40M, is considering conceiving a child with his ex. I am not the op. That is you, conception drama. Posts can be found on our relationship advice. Trigger warning. Child loss. Less than. Mood spoiler. Sad. Less than. Original post posted on July 18, 2022 in relationship advice. My 33F husband, 40M, is considering conceiving a child with his ex. https old.reddit.com/r/relationship-advice/comments/w20dv/my33fhusband40 misconsidering conceiving a TL. Doctor. My stepson suddenly passed away 4 weeks ago and my stepson's biomom wants to have another child with my husband. I'll preface with the fact that therapy is an absolute given already. So I will be seeking that out. But in the meantime need some advice to just process what to even say to a therapist when the time comes. Okay, so the title needs explanation because it is a complicated and nuanced emotional situation. Apologies in advance for rambling. I am still trying to make sense of the entire situation while grieving and just trying to get the pertinent details out for advice. My husband and I have been happily married for 3 years now. My husband had a son from a previous relationship before we got together. I have been in my stepson's life since he was 2 years old. He turned 6 years old this year and got along very well. My stepson's biomom, BM, and I have never been friends in any capacity, but have always been cordial, respectful on the rare times we interacted and never had any issue with one another. My husband and BM are similarly cordial, respectful, and communicative around their son's needs but not really friends beyond that. We pretty much adhered to a parallel parenting style and it worked fine. 4 weeks ago, my stepson tragically and very suddenly died from an infection. It has been just absolutely devastating for everyone. BM is especially just wrecked. Her son was literally her entire life and purpose as a stay-at-home single mom. My grief cannot compare to the level one knows she feels, and I do have compassion for that. My husband is of course also exceptionally distraught. I've been doing my best to be understanding in how they both need to grieve as parents. 2 days ago my husband said he had something he needed to discuss with me. He explained that BM approached him with a request she asked my husband to be her sperm donor for IVF as she desperately wants to be a mom again and wants to conceive a child with the same partner that her son had. He basically made it clear it is something he is willing, even wanting, to do but knows he needs to understand how I feel about it. Well, I don't how exactly to communicate what I feel about it at this point. But the feelings are not good ones. I told him I needed some time to process this. My husband and I have been trying to have a child of our own for the past few months. So this is even more personally difficult for me to take in. I think I already know that I am not okay with my husband having another child with his ex. But I am thinking of suggesting we offer her financial support to seek out alternative fertility options that do not involve my husband's sperm. And quite honestly, do not involve 18 years of co-parenting. I'm actually not even sure what BM and my husband are thinking regarding that in this scenario. Additionally, BM is 41 years old, so there is a high probability this whole situation would be a lot of money and time spent without any results. Overall, I think I'm just in shock here. I feel disrespected and angry. But I also understand it's not really just about me here, and that both of them are struggling to cope with this unimaginable grief. I would just appreciate some level advice from people outside this situation. Specifically advice on how I should convey that I am not on board with this without making it a point of contention. Edit. Thank you so much already for the responses. I feel like this is happening to someone else. It is such a shocking and emotional wave after wave. Very difficult to process and think totally rationally. I honestly consider understanding and compassion to be personal strengths of mine. So I appreciate the replies acknowledging that I am not betraying that by being a firm no on facilitating this situation. I would just add that I am fortunate to be financially stable independently. And my husband and I had already set aside a fairly significant sum specifically for child support. So even had this specific scenario not arisen, I feel obligated to offer some if not all of that to BM. Since it was always intended to go to her and son, anyway. I will keep reading through replies. Thank you again. And at this point plan to speak with my husband this evening about feeling it is inappropriate to consider this now, and dealing with his grief first and foremost with professional help. Update 1 posted on July 19, 2022 in Relationship Advice. Update. My 33F husband, 40M, is considering conceiving a child with his ex. https old.reddit.com/r/relationship advice/comments/w2roy4/update my 33F husband 40 misconsidering/ previous post I didn't know the Throwra unrule for low score alt accounts, so my previous post was removed but the text is still there I think. Update TL. Dr. Husband and I will be getting counseling and ending all contact with BM. Thank you again to the blunt takes on my situation. Days are still mostly a blur right now, and writing out my issue and reading through the straightforward advice did help ground me a bit. I went ahead and took action on something I could control. Reached out to my therapist and got a reference for a couples counselor who is specifically experienced in dealing with grief around child loss. I was thankfully able to get us fit in for an appointment this week. After I returned home from work last night, my husband came into our room and immediately started sobbing and apologizing. He had spoken with his dad that day and told him what BM had proposed. My father-in-law, bless him, had apparently really went off on the delusion of it. My husband and I had a long into the early morning talk about it, and he was able to recognize and explain that what seemed like interest in BM's request was misplaced desires. He explained that he's been so focused and excited about the prospect of planning for a child with me for the last 4 months and envisioning life as a father of 2. And it felt confusing to still be feeling that while dealing with the devastation of losing his son. BM's ask was a total shock for him too, and when you're face to face with someone grieving so deeply, asking for your help, a solution, however absurd it is, it's not always as easy to think logically. He was receptive and seemed relieved to have the therapy appointment. So I am hopeful that will be a start in unpacking these complicated and conflicting feelings. We agreed that he should ultimately end all contact with BM. But we'll still consider what sort of short-term, lump sum financial support makes sense with consult from a lawyer to keep it entirely copacetic. I realize some commenters find the financial part odd, but I just feel strongly about extending appropriate generosity in this transition since we have the means to do so. We also agreed to hold off on any child planning until sufficient time and counseling takes place. Also, I just want to address the comments on stay-at-home single mom aspect in defense of BM. I only mentioned that part to say how entirely devoted she was to her son. She was the primary physical caregiver, and yes, the child support order was enough that it allowed her the option to stay home full-time and live comfortable but not extravagantly. Is it the same decision I would make as a career-minded person? No, but that was her prerogative and I do respect that. I really don't know much about BM as a person, but what I do know is that she was raising a kind, funny, and smart boy who was loved and cared for, and that was what ultimately mattered. To say there's a lot still up in the air emotionally is an understatement. My husband and I are saying the right things to each other now. Who knows what it will end up being in practice? But I am hopeful at this point that my husband and I will be able to move forward together. Update 2 posted on November 14, 2022 in Relationship Advice. Update number 2. My 33F husband, 40M, is considering conceiving a child with his ex. https old.reddit.com/r/relationshipadvice/comments/yuck035/update 2 my 33F husband 40 misconsidering /TLDR. My husband lied, withheld information and is having a child with his ex. I received many very kind, compassionate, helpful comments and PMs from my original posts and thought it would be easiest to update here for those that ask because it's a wild development. I think you can see the previous posts on my account in the comments as they were removed for low karma on this account. So I found out that my husband did not tell me the truth about BM's request. The truth being that he and BM had frozen embryos when they were together from years ago and she was planning to use those. I obviously had no idea they had done this and likely would have never known if not for the fact that BM did have a successful implantation and is now in her first trimester. So my husband was forced to come clean. The distress I feel about everything that has happened in the past 4 months is beyond words. So that's it, that's the update. I don't know what to do regarding so many things about this. At least I have a good therapist. Reminder, I am not the original poster. The face I made when I read that last update. Moot point now that OOP is removing herself from the situation. But I wonder what the legal disposition of the embryos was from the first divorce. It's almost always covered. Did BM retain full ownership and implant with O husband's approval? Or worse, obtain approval quickly after the son's death and husband was blind with grief? And so he hoped it wouldn't work and he wouldn't have to explain his lapse in judgment to OOP? The embryos are a wild twist. Good thing OOP stated in comments that she will divorce him. She doesn't deserve this bad try of a husband. Woof. There is so much to unpack here. I honestly don't even know what kind of advice I could possibly give OOP here. I can't help but feel like this new baby is going to have the same name as the lost son and be forced into the same hobbies and interests as the son. Sad all around. I don't think the ex-wife can use the frozen embryos without the consent of her ex-husband. So yeah, he told a big ol' lie to his current wife. And that dishonesty may be the real deal breaker. It doesn't seem like the husband and his ex-partner were ever married. But to keep my post comprehensible, I'll use those terms. The poor kid was dead for 4 weeks and already they are replacing him. I hate to say it, but is this even real? Would a professional, frozen embryo doctor actually facilitate this given this woman's emotional state? I feel like there are legal and ethical points that just aren't addressed here. Husband went to OP with the request 4 weeks after his son died. Then, he reveals 4 months later that BM is pregnant, but claims it was from previously frozen embryos and she is in her first trimester. Note: OP does not mention that stepson was conceived via IVF in OP, which feels like info she would have mentioned given the request. I feel like it is far more likely husband and BM in their grief had sex after stepson deed, maybe only once, maybe a few times, and at that 4-week point, BM told him she was pregnant. So husband came up with the donating sperm story to float the idea past OP. Panicked after talking to his dad. Came up with the cut all communication with BM plan so that she and OP never spoke. and then just hoped BM would miscarry given her age, circumstances surrounding the conception. Now that she is out of the first trimester, she is starting to show an unlikely to miscarry and probably expects husband to step up and co-parent, so he has to tell op something, and this is what he came up with. I bet the baby is born premature, and husband will insist it is a miracle. Geez. Nothing to say except I'd be gone in a heartbeat. Grief is one thing. Having another kid with your ex while married to someone else is another thing. I know that losing a child must be one of, if not, the most traumatic things that anyone can go through, and that grief can change people. But the fact that BM immediately thought of getting pregnant again makes me feel like she just wants a replacement for the child she lost. Oy vey. I can't even with this one. Gross story. Originally it seemed they were going for replacement child, and that is extremely off-putting. Now it just seems like the ex-wife is just trying to get the rest of her life funded. Equally off-putting. This poor current wife. Hope she gets out before she gets pregnant by this guy. I'm very curious about laws and consent around the frozen embryos when a couple separates. Like, how does that work? Is it someone's property to decide what to do with? Do both parties whose genetic material is involved have to consent to what happens with them in the event that they separate? I'm sure I will go down a Google rabbit hole on this when I have time, but would love to hear from any informed commenters what the deal is. This sucks so much for Oop. I hope Oop does some serious soul searching and spends some quality time with her own therapist. Husband is putting his prior marriage above his current one, and that is not a good place to be starting a family from. Aside from Oop, I really feel for this new child. Having a mom who makes their kid their entire world is hard enough. Having that and being a literal replacement for a child lost to tragedy adds several layers of potential unpleasantness. That's a lot to have hanging over your head. And now they're probably going to be the reason their dad's second marriage ended to boot. They're going to need all the luck they can get with that. Wow. The BM is grieving in the most unhealthy way possible. Replacing her son with a new baby. I feel like if the husband had just said, BM wants to use our previously created frozen embryos, it would have been much less disruptive to their relationship. Him and Oop. It wouldn't involve any part of him in his identity as OOP's husband. Why didn't he just present it that way in the first place? Asking for permission to provide a live sperm sample to his ex for the purpose of recreating the child they had together is quite a personal matter. It just feels so much more intimate. After reading the last update, if Oop doesn't leave him, then she is a fool. I understand he and BM need to process their grief, but this is a whole other can of worms. I'm waiting for next update. There never was frozen anything, it was an affair. Awful everything, I wouldn't even judge them. It's like all the main characters were hit by cars.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.